Chapter 6. Echoes of Deception. Fredric and Arina ventured deeper into the forest as dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the landscape. The path led them to the edge of a dense, ancient woodland, its trees towering high with thick canopies that obscured the sky. The air was filled with an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. Even the sunlight seemed reluctant to penetrate the thick foliage, creating an atmosphere of foreboding that gnawed at Fredric's nerves. "This place gives me the creeps," Fredric muttered, glancing around nervously. His hand instinctively gripped the hilt of his sword, the weight of the weapon both comforting and intimidating. Arina nodded, her expression serious. "Stay alert. We don't know what we might encounter here." Her voice was steady, but Fredric could sense the tension in her posture. This forest was different from the open roads and bustling towns they had traversed before. It was a place where the usual rules didn't seem to apply. As they moved forward, the forest seemed to grow darker and more oppressive. The thick canopy overhead blocked out much of the sunlight, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Strange whispers floated on the breeze, and shadows shifted in the corners of their vision, making it difficult to discern reality from imagination. Fredric's heart pounded in his chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the forest. Gnarled roots snaked across the ground, threatening to trip the unwary traveler, and the trees seemed to close in around them, their twisted branches resembling skeletal hands. Fredric's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to keep his composure, but the eerie atmosphere was getting to him. Arina's keen eyes scanned their surroundings, her hand never straying far from her sword. She had heard tales of the Whispering Woods, a place where travelers often vanish without a trace, lured by unseen forces. Her father had warned her about such places, where magic and malevolence intertwined. She shook off the unsettling thoughts, focusing on the task at hand. Suddenly, an old woman appeared on the path ahead. She was hunched and cloaked in rags, with a mischievous glint in her eyes. Her sudden appearance made Fredric jump, and he tightened his grip on his sword. "Travelers, lost in the Whispering Woods?" she cackled, her voice like the creak of an ancient door. "Let me guide you through for a price." Her grin revealed teeth yellowed with age, and her eyes sparkled with a malevolent glee. Arina's eyes narrowed. She had seen such trickery before. "We don't need your help," she replied coldly, stepping protectively in front of Fredric. The old woman's grin widened, her eyes locking onto Arina's with unsettling intensity. "Oh, but you do," she said, her voice dripping with malice. She raised her hands, fingers twisted like the branches of the trees around them, and a burst of light engulfed them. Fredric blinked, his vision blurring as the world around him seemed to shift and warp. The familiar forest path faded, replaced by a chaotic scene. He heard shouts and the clatter of hooves. Looking around, he saw a group of bandits emerging from the trees, weapons drawn, closing in on him. "Bandits!" he shouted, drawing his sword, his voice tinged with panic. His mind raced as he tried to remember his training, but the fear was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Arina found herself surrounded by snarling orcs, their eyes filled with murderous intent. She drew her sword, her face a mask of rage. "You will not take me down!" she yelled, charging at the nearest orc with a ferocity born of desperation. Fredric's heart pounded in his chest as he swung his sword at the bandits. His first strike was clumsy, the blade glancing off an opponent's armor with a dull thud. He clumsily parried a blow, the force of it vibrating up his arm. Another bandit lunged at him, and he barely sidestepped in time, feeling the rush of air as the blade passed by his face. He retaliated with a wild swing, but his sword sliced through nothing but air. The bandits' laughter echoed around him, a sinister and mocking sound. Fredric's breaths came in ragged gasps as he fought off another attack, his movements becoming more desperate with each passing moment. A bandit lunged at him with a dagger, and Fredric managed to deflect the blow, feeling the cold sweat on his brow. He countered with a swift strike, but again, his blade met only empty space. In a brief lull, Fredric noticed something odd. The figures didn't cast shadows. His eyes widened as he realized the truth. "These aren't real," he whispered to himself. Stepping back, he focused on his breathing, remembering Arina's lessons. As he did, the figures seemed to waver. Fredric's realization sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. His fear gave way to determination as he tried to make sense of the illusion that surrounded him. Ignoring the bandits, he searched for the source of the deception, his sword held at the ready. Arina, still locked in battle with the imaginary orcs, didn't hear Fredric's warning. She fought furiously, her movements precise but driven by anger. An orc swung a massive club at her, and she ducked, rolling to the side and coming up with a slash that cut through the illusion. The orc shimmered but didn't disappear. She growled in frustration and redoubled her efforts. Fredric charged towards the witch, his senses on high alert. He dodged past the illusory bandits, his eyes fixed on the old woman as she continued to weave her spell. With a surge of determination, he closed the distance between them, his sword raised high. "Enough of this," he yelled, slashing at her with all his might. His blade connected, and the witch let out a blood-curdling scream, the illusion shattering around them like glass. The forest returned to its natural state. The bandits and orcs vanished, leaving Fredric and Arina alone in the clearing. Arina, breathing heavily, looked around in confusion, then realization dawning on her face. I fell for it," she muttered, lowering her sword. A simple illusion. Fredric approached her cautiously, his heart still racing from the intensity of the encounter. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Arina nodded, though her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. "You did well, Fredric. You stayed calm and used your head." She sighed, sheathing her sword. "But don't get overconfident. Human witches have no real defenses or attacks beyond their illusions." Fredric nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I'll remember that," he said, a sense of determination in his voice. They stood in the clearing for a moment, catching their breath and allowing the adrenaline to subside. The forest was silent now, the only sound the rustle of leaves and the gentle breeze. Fredric looked around, still half expecting the bandits to reappear. But there was nothing. "Come on," Arina said finally, breaking the silence. "We should find a safe place to rest for the night." Fredric nodded, following her lead as they made their way deeper into the woods, the events of the day still fresh in their minds. The darkness of the forest receded as Fredric and Arina emerged into the open, the last rays of sunlight painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. They trudged wearily, their steps heavy with exhaustion, until they found a suitable spot to make camp just outside the woods. Arina's usual stoic demeanor was tinged with frustration as they settled in for the night. She couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment in herself for falling prey to the witch's spell, for letting her anger get the better of her. Her father, the mage, had always been there to guide her, to calm her when her rage threatened to overwhelm her. His wisdom and presence had been a constant anchor in her life, tempering her natural affinity for battle with a calm, strategic mind. But now, without him, she felt adrift, her temper more difficult to manage, her thoughts more chaotic. As she sat by the fire, her mind was consumed by memories of her father. She remembered his gentle voice, his reassuring touch, his unwavering confidence in her abilities. He had always reminded her to control her rage, to channel it into strength rather than succumb to it. But today, she had let him down, allowing her anger to cloud her judgment and leaving Fredric to bear the brunt of her frustration. Fredric sensed her turmoil but remained silent, giving her space to work through her thoughts. He knew that Arina's pride had taken a hit today, and he didn't want to add to her burden. Instead, he focused on tending to the fire, setting up their makeshift camp, and ensuring they had enough provisions for the night. As the fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the forest floor, Arina closed her eyes, taking deep breaths in an attempt to find the calm center her father had always helped her reach. But tonight, it eluded her, slipping through her fingers like smoke on the wind. Fredric watched her from across the fire, his own thoughts swirling with a mix of concern and understanding. He knew that Arina was struggling, that the weight of their journey and the memories of her father weighed heavily on her shoulders. But he also knew that she was strong, stronger than she gave herself credit for, and that she would find a way to overcome this inner turmoil in time. As the night deepened and the stars began to twinkle overhead, Fredric and Arina settled into an uneasy sleep, the shadows of the forest still lingering in their minds. But amidst the darkness, there was a glimmer of hope, a flicker of determination that burned bright in their hearts. For though they faced many challenges on their journey, they faced them together, bound by a shared sense of purpose that would carry them through even the darkest of nights.